And I began to learn about orgasm and yoni eggs and tantra. And from there, everything changed, and I became incredibly sensitive. And I started having like different kinds of orgasms, and I began to have more sensation in my body.
Welcome to the Healing Cocoon. I'm Jacoby Gray, soul alignment and success coach and energy healer, which means I can intuit the subtle layers of your energy field to promote ultimate health and well-being. My goal for this podcast is to shed light on the healing journey itself and help you feel more supported as you embark on the process of unpacking your past to consciously create your present and start living the life of your dreams. Through the study of coaching, kinesiology, holographic kinetics, meditation, Reiki, the chakra system, and many other modalities, I've learned how to release the blocks that were holding me back. Now I'd love to help you do the same. By embarking on your own self-healing process, you'll see the world transforming around you in ways you never thought possible. You'll begin to experience more connection, clarity, love, fulfillment, synchronicity, and success than you've ever had before. So welcome to the Ascension. Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to the Healing Cocoon. Today's episode is really interesting because as I'm putting it together with my awesome assistant, Rufa, it's actually coinciding with the realization that I need to create more rest or room for rest in my life. I'm someone who just goes and goes and goes and goes. It could be my Aries rising, I'm not sure, but I definitely don't stop until I face plant into my bed at the end of the day. And this episode today, we're speaking with Anne-Marie Paul, and she is a feminine embodiment coach. And she herself has had a journey from, I guess, existing within more of that masculine structure that the world is kind of based on, and her journey back to incorporating the feminine energies, which do allow for things like rest. So Anne-Marie is someone who's actually cracked the codes of feminine embodiment and feminine wisdom. Her deep knowing that the body holds ancient wisdom has led her on like a powerful path toward purposeful, open-hearted living. And she's a woman's embodiment mentor, intuitive, tantrica, and womb alchemist. And her own journey of empowerment through listening to her womb voice has led her to sharing ancient tantric priestess practices with others so that they too can come into close relationship with their own exquisitely unique womb voice. And something that she believes, and so do I, is that living from the feminine womb voice is a radical, ancient, sacred practice that will actually heal humanity of things like selfishness, greed, fear, separation. So this is a really beautiful chat today, and I hope you enjoy it. So, Anne-Marie Paul, I'm so excited to have you on the Healing Cocoon podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to connect and talk to you and share. Yeah, it's a real honor to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. And I know you've got so much goodness and womb wisdom to share, which I would love to jump right into because I know you yourself have had quite a healing journey. Where did it start and how did you get to where you are right now as a female embodiment coach?
Yeah, great question. I love that you just dove right into the juicy bits, right in there.
Let's go.
Yeah. Started as very typical, traditional, conservative American woman from the Northeast, and I was raised Catholic, and I was a bit of a tomboy when I was a kid, which I loved being athletic. And then basically straight out of college, I became a yoga teacher, which is a very masculine sort of discipline, and then entrepreneur. As a yoga teacher, I was only teaching for other people for a few years before I started doing my own thing. So I have always been very driven very competitive, and I loved it, and that's great. And I don't take for granted the opportunities that women have to sort of compete in a man's world. But ultimately, I'm a woman, and I was denying my femininity, and I was denying the parts of me that were women were feminine. I was not honoring my menstrual cycle. I just remember, taking ibuprofen, which is like a painkiller, to suppress the intense period cramps that I would have, and just going about my day, making absolutely no adjustments to my schedule to account for the fact that I was profusely bleeding. And this is very detrimental, I think, for a woman's hormonal cycles and the way that she feels. It's detrimental for our emotions to not honor that time and rest. And what was happening for me sexually, while all this competition in the man's world and practicing intense yoga, was a lot of numbness and not a lot of pleasure, like literal numbness in my pelvic area, like no sensation. So fortunately, I'm very orientated towards spirituality. Like that's also something, which is a very feminine thing. So throughout my entrepreneurial journey, I've also been very surrendered to spirit and to prayer and connected to my higher self. And I ended up here in Bali 5 years ago. So I live in Bali now. And when I got here to Bali, the energy of the island is so feminine because it's very natural. Like nature really dominates here. The bugs, the monkeys, the trees, the dirt, the wind, the ocean, the waves, she's in charge. And I could feel that as soon as I put my feet on the tarmac, the moment I stepped off the airplane. I could feel the aliveness of this volcanic island that I was now standing on, and I'm still living on 5 years later. And so that started my journey with tuning into my human self as a woman and as a female with hormonal cycles. And I began to learn about orgasm and yoni eggs and tantra. And from there, everything changed, and I became incredibly sensitive, and I started having different kinds of orgasms, and I began to have more sensation in my body. And I learned how to be emotionally available for myself, because prior to all of this, my emotions were something wrong and bad that shouldn't be felt, that were completely out of control, that were also at the same time being like splashed out towards innocent bystanders at times because they were so suppressed. And so I'm going to pause there because that's like a lot, a bit of a tangent.
No, not at all. It makes complete sense. And I love that Bali itself, which is where you and I met, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, was the initiator of you stepping into your feminine divinity and reconnecting with that part of yourself. And two things that you mentioned that are interesting to me is when you said that yoga is a very masculine discipline, and I think absolutely with Ashtanga and Bikram and all those quite intense versions of yoga. However, it's interesting because I've always found it to be something quite sensitive and quite feminine, but perhaps because I came to it at a place where I was, my marriage was breaking down, and so I was on my mat crying, and it was very much healing me, and I found it to be a very consoling practice. But I know you actually used to compete, and I guess subscribe to that more disciplined side of yoga, would you say?
Yeah, like yoga is definitely can be very nurturing and very healing. And I love that it helped you at that time and was such a place of like solitude and sanctuary, I should say, not solitude, and especially deep gratitude to those teachers that just allowed you to have that space to cry. I also remember crying during classes because the stretching releases energy from the body. And so energy in the body can be released also through tears. So that's beautiful. The thing that makes yoga masculine is that it's like these straight lines. And so it doesn't, whereas there's other feminine practices like belly dancing. It's like, if you can imagine like the hips moving and going in circles. There's other movement practices that are more circular that help to bring the circulation and creates actually space in the hips for the womb and the ovaries and even the bladder. So a lot of times what can happen with yoga is that these organs are not accounted for in a lot of these postures because they were created for men and by men. And so when women do them in excess, they can kind of get squished and pushed in the wrong place and pushed down, because we aren't actually supposed to be contracting and sucking in those lower abdominal muscles for that long, but especially when we're premenstrual or bleeding. And in Ashtanga, they actually account for that. They say when a woman is bleeding, don't come, especially don't do the inversions, because you don't want your pelvis above your head or your heart. Actually, I think that they say downward dog's okay, but not pelvis above the heart or above the head. Because you want all of the energy to release and you want the muscles to completely relax. So I think that this was what yoga is great, but for me, I really overdid it. I'm very competitive. And yes, I did used to compete. So I was practicing every single day for years. And I think that's what led to the, we'd say like burnout. I don't know if it was actually could be diagnosed as adrenal fatigue, but definitely it burnt me out.
And I liked what you said about the observation of your menstrual cycle once you became aware that that was something that was required as a woman. Thinking about how everything we do right now is based on that 24-hour clock, which is the masculine clock, whereas the feminine body clock is actually a monthly cycle. And it's really interesting. I mean, the time difference between those two clocks is huge. When a man will reset on a daily basis and a woman is resetting on a monthly basis. How do you suppose we are best able to blend those two worlds?
Oh, good question. I think for what's happened for me with the, tuning into my menstrual cycle and just giving myself that space to rest. The time right before I bleed and then those first few days of bleeding are they're very like psychic times, in the sense that like I'm able to sense more. Like I'm very, very sensitive. And so what will happen is it's a really good time to process anything that hasn't been processed emotionally during the prior few weeks, or if there's anything you haven't processed from the past months or whatever. This is a time where you can process it emotionally, fully feel it, and release it. And so I think for women to kind of blend the 24-hour clock with that, our natural cycle, which is a month long, there's two things. One, take the pressure off of yourself to every day be the same. Take the pressure off of yourself to show up the same every single day. Like just even knowing that, okay, there's going to be times of the month where I'm going to feel amazing and excited and enthusiastic, and I'm going to have energy for all those things. And then there's going to be times of the month where even the slightest little thing is going to feel like a ton of bricks. It's going to feel like I'm pushing a boulder up a hill. So that when I'm premenstrual, the body is weaker physically. Like the muscles are actually weaker. So it's harder to open pickle jars. It's harder to lift heavy things. So just knowing that changes the mindset around needing to show up in your full radiant self every day. But also knowing that one thing that I didn't know before I went on this whole healing journey was just the necessity of digesting life, of taking time, of moving slower, of the importance of processing. So, learning about how to honor the menstrual cycle, process and allowing myself to cry, allowing myself to let go, consciously bleeding. So what I do now is I offer my blood back to the earth, or I journal on what's coming up for me. I have lots of tools for processing and releasing and letting go. You can do that on a daily basis. And this is actually an amazing thing to do for anybody who wants to unblock their creativity, or it actually does give you more energy. You'll be less lethargic throughout the day if you take the time to process. So what that will look like for me right now in the 24-hour cycle is a very long meditation practice. So I have a long meditation practice. And then also this comes from The Artist's Way, which is a book on how to unblock your creativity. I'm sure you've heard of it, and probably a lot of your viewers. Exactly.
Yeah. So that's what some of the things that you'll do when you're bleeding is. That I'm assuming your morning meditation is something you do every morning. And is the morning pages something you also do every morning, or is that just something you do to help you process?
Yeah, I do a lot of. I live more in the realm of creation and of sensation and of feeling, rather than this is kind of how my life has shifted, is that I'm living a lot in that realm of magic and of creation so first the meditation, then the morning pages, just to really process, because I couldn't, as an entrepreneur, hustle and do all day long. And when I did try to strategize and try to do a lot of doing and action steps, this didn't increase productivity or happiness or help my clients more or move me closer to my goals. For me as a woman, what moves me closer to my goals, and which is basically peace, love, joy, happiness, just feeling settled and safe and stable and, in my routine, is creating in the imaginal realms. So that's the meditation and the EFT tapping and the journaling and the yoni eggs and all that. And that's how I move the ball forward with my entrepreneurial business world.
I love the blend of the feminine and the masculine, I guess, because traditionally business has been quite a masculine or male dominated field. So as you began awakening to your feminine self, did you study? Were you reading books, or was this learning intuitive? Was it something that you just connected to the land and downloaded all this information, or how did it come to you?
Great question. So this journey is like, there were a lot of books and a lot of teachers and a lot of courses and a lot of retreats and a lot of trainings that I did to connect with mentors and guides and, other women doing this work that could teach me specific Taoist tantric yoni egg practices, and books I read, Women Who Run with Wolves, Vagina, Pussy, A Reclamation, lots and lots of books.
Book.
Yeah, so good.
It's so good.
She's amazing. I did read a lot of books. I'm so trained to fall into the masculine patterns, even being here on this natural island, that the feminine, the divine feminine, it still dominates me. So if I'll go back to those patterns, and the divine feminine will make me sick. We'll put the electricity out. We'll do things to stop me in my tracks so that I process. And this is so my journey, there were lots of downloads and intuitive, like I would download all this information and I would speak it out and teach it to groups and clients as I started to teach this. And then I would read it in books, because it's a collective thing that we're all waking up to together. And so the information came through books, but it also came through downloads, but it also came through anytime I do get off that track and start to become masculine, life will somehow push me back into the feminine, like I said, through sickness or through a flood or through just something external that's like, nope, the feminine is going to rule your life, and that's it. There will be no other way.
I'm interrupting this awesome chat to quickly tell you all about the free meditation I've created for peace, presence, and empowerment. It kind of sounds like a big promise, but when you break it down, a sense of inner peace comes from being present because you're not feeling anxious about the past or worried about the future. You're simply with this moment here, right now. And empowerment is also a byproduct of presence because what's the one similarity you notice about the people in your life who have the confidence to ask for what they need and want, not in a pushy or narcissistic way, but in a way that feels genuine, clear, and unattached to the outcome of their ask, which ultimately then makes you more receptive to fulfilling their needs and wants. That's true empowerment. And that one similarity that all those people have in common is presence. So this meditation is designed to give you a repeatable experience of presence so that you can begin integrating those feelings of peace and empowerment into your everyday life. I'd love for you to try it out, ideally 2 to 3 times a week for a month. I know it's a commitment, but you've got this. And let me know what starts shifting for you once you do. So pop onto our website, thehealingcocoon.co, that's C-O, not .com, and download your free audio track right now.
Wow, that's really incredible. And so it's a process of, I guess, forgetting yourself, is it? And stepping back into just those unconscious programs that were that you formed I guess neurologically you formed your life patterning around as a child. Is it just those patterns, and how do you break them down once you've become aware and suddenly you've fallen into a pattern and Mother Nature has made you ill or something's happened which is causing you to just stop and reflect? Is it an instantaneous reconnection to your feminine abilities, or is it something that then you need to sit with for a few days and process? And like how quickly can you reconnect?
Usually takes me a few days to realize what's happened. So when I do go off track, like this year I injured my right foot twice and I was on crutches, and I've never injured my right foot before. But I was just going too fast, moving too much, doing things that really weren't aligning me to my highest, happiest, most joyful, expansive, confident self. And so the foot was injured because I needed to stop and rest and process the lessons and just literally be there in a resting place. And both times there was a lot of resistance that came up, and a lot of like self-blame of why am I injuring myself, and a lot of loneliness and feeling bad for myself. And then there would be, within that period of time of being laid up, then I might find some grace and some appreciation, and I would feel my angels and my guides, and I would feel the higher lesson come through. But then there's resistance again, and so it's kind of like a dipping in and out of it. But ultimately it's like every time I look back on my life, it's like, wow, okay, I have grown, I have changed. And there's always this this I can measure the growth when I look back. But it's almost like just being in the moment with it. I'm like, what's happening? Why is my foot hurting still again? Didn't I learn this lesson? So, but looking back, I can see it, that how far I've come.
Yeah. And so the beginning of your journey, what inspired you to actually step onto the yogic path? Was there some trauma you were dealing with, or did you have an awakening? Or coming from a conservative Catholic background, what was it that even called you that direction?
You mean yoga, or more getting into the feminine arts?
Well, because you said yoga was your sort of first step onto the path.
Oh, okay.
I'm always interested in
that first step. Yeah.
That first step, because I think a lot of listeners are at the place where they're just taking that first step now.
Yeah. So this is it's like it's emotional for me to speak about this. When I was in my last few years of college, my grandmother moved in with my mom. And I think it must have been summer because I was home, and my grandmother started to lose her mental faculties and her physical strength. And I took care of her, and I saw that decline, and I saw the fear, and I saw the physical pain that she was going through. And I said to myself, I'm never going to get old. I'm going to start doing yoga now. And whether, I think we're human beings, we have human meat suits. Who knows what's going to happen? But that was for me the motivation to take that first step and get into that yoga room was, just taking care of my grandmother. So I don't know if that's, I was young at the time.
And it sent you into a deep space of self-reflection that perhaps up until that point you were just tracking along with the everyday life, and suddenly you were faced with mortality, your own mortality, through the lens of your grandmother.
Yeah. And it was really, I was drinking a lot in college, and I remember my aunt taking me to an AA meeting because my family was worried about me. And it was like an AA meeting for women. And the topic of that meeting just happened to be college drinking. And the women were reflecting on how when they were in college, it was totally normal and it wasn't a big deal. And it was just, it was totally socially acceptable to drink excessively in college. But now, 10, 20 years later, these same women were struggling with this beast.
An addiction.
Yeah. And for me, yoga just cut that completely. I became so committed and dedicated to improving those poses that anything that got in the way of that, I started changing what I ate. And I was like, no, alcohol gives me a hangover and my practice isn't good when I have a hangover. Forget about it. Like, that was the number one priority for me. So that's, so there was a lot that yoga really healed in my consciousness and in my energy, in those years of really waking up so much of, like, it led me to such incredible places. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that was the first step of the journey. And then fast forward, there was a calling to come to Bali, which was obviously going to take you on a much deeper journey into yourself.
Yeah.
What was that calling?
This is so funny. So at my yoga teacher training in 2007, there was a guy there. So you're Australian, so there was an Australian guy who used to come to Bali on vacation with his wife and kids. And he looked at me at the training and he was like, "You live in Bali." And I was like, "What are you talking about, Jack?" And he's like, "Just go, pack your bags, sell everything you own." And I was like, "Oh my God." But it stuck with me. And then, took me almost 10 years to actually buy my plane ticket and come. But the calling to come was this intense voice in my heart. And I would say, "Why do I need to go to Bali?" And the voice in my heart would just say, "Because it's going to be fun. You're going to like it." So I finally came, and I just felt totally at home here. Like, oh, this is where I belong. I always felt like my style of dress was weird, but that here in Bali, it was normal. Like, it's a strange thing, but it's just my energy is very at home here. And I was really motivated when I got here to connect with my feminine energy, because there was a woman who she wanted me to hire her. And so her sales tactic, and I did actually, I worked with her for just a little bit, but she said, I was really suffering coming out of a relationship. It was just a brief one, but I landed here crying, brokenhearted over that relationship, not, becoming soulmate, marriage, everything. And so she said, "You're too masculine and you need to be feminine. That's why you're not married and don't have kids." So that was her sales. That was her sales lingo. Yeah, and it worked. It worked. But I mean, I don't really believe that that's true, that you have to be, like, I think that was a little bit sneaky, manipulative selling, but ultimately I did need to get in touch with my feminine energy, and it was out of balance. There was too much of my masculine drive running through me. And so she was one of my first teachers on the path here.
That's amazing. And so that journey now, I mean, you talk about the feminine codes. Could you enlighten our audience as when people talk about light codes and feminine codes, what actually are you referring to as the keeper of those codes and someone who can impart those to other women?
It's it's a very emotional thing, and it's about being okay with surrendering to your emotions and surrendering to the divine plan and surrendering to life and really letting go, like trusting. For me, feminine energy is about connecting to the womb, which is a source of creation and creativity. And when I say creation, it's like we are co-creating our life with something greater than us, and surrendering to that wisdom and intelligence. And we have this really powerful and beautiful mind, ego, that's conditioned from our family and from our society and from our culture that thinks our life should be a certain way. So when a woman connects with her womb, she's really connecting with creation and with this other higher intelligent energy, which will ultimately lead to a more satisfying life. So we can try, like this word try, with our mind. We can use our mind to manipulate or to force, which is a very masculine thing, with like structure and strategy and planning. And all of that is all well and good. But when those things don't work, how do you react as a woman? Do you continue to force? Do you continue to push? Do you continue to strategize or try another way? Or can you let go? So for me, feminine energy and really trusting and surrendering to the feminine is like, okay, just completely letting what didn't work out go. And there's a higher plan here. There's a higher plan. There's something that I can't even imagine. That's so great. Because it's like with Bali, my heart told me to come here. I could never have imagined the community that I would find, the beaches I would find, the fruit that I would find, the fun, the scooter. Like, I love driving my scooter around. I love that I travel by scooter. And I always I didn't like cars. I just hated them. And I live in a world where I don't need a car. And that's unheard of, I think, for most people coming from the place that I came from. My nephew, this is kind of a funny tangent, but like when he was a baby, he was so obsessed. He loved cars. And he was just like, he would ask, which one is your car? Which one is your car? Because everybody had a car. Because we're so imprinted with that everybody needs a car. And I know that's not the same for people in England or other places where they use more public transportation, or New York City. People don't necessarily drive cars. But yeah, that's just one small example of the way that life here is so suited to me. But I would never have known that. But I really surrendered. Like when I say I feel blessed that the divine feminine dominates me, prior to moving here to Bali, everything was falling apart in my life, but I kept trying. And there was a solid year and a half of just ridiculous situations that just kept going. And every time they would happen, I'd be like, what do you want from me, God? And it'd be like, go to Bali, just go. And it took me a year and a half of like struggling and trying before I finally let go and came.
Because often it's those things that seem so whimsical and illogical, those callings in our heart, which are always there to be listened to, but often they don't make sense in the world that we're living in. And it is the acceptance of the feminine is finally surrendering to those whimsical ideas and going, all right, well, let me sell everything and let me jump on a plane and let me see what happens, and look at the world you stepped into and what you created. And there's just such a beautiful unfolding for you from the touchdown in Bali to where you are now. It's amazing.
Yeah, totally. I love how you put that, whimsical, because it's so true. And everybody has those little dreams, those little whispers, those little desires. But they're like, but why? And it's like, because it would be fun.
Yeah.
Just do it because it would be fun.
Yeah. So you obviously work with women and helping them wake themselves up to their feminine energy and their womb wisdom. Do you think there's value in working with men in helping them open up to their feminine? And is that something you've ever explored?
Yeah, I do that. I don't really advertise it, but I do. I work with men, and the way that I help them is with other energy practices and with my mental practices and different things, helping them achieve goals and release the past. And yeah, exactly what you said, connecting to the feminine, which would be connecting to their higher form of intelligence, working through them, and just trusting their own healing and releasing their past in order to step into the future that they are really desiring. So I do that. And I do think there's absolutely value in that.
That's beautiful. Do you think that healing, that true healing, is the ultimate combination of that masculine and feminine dance? Is it the balance? Is that when we achieve wholeness, do you think?
The balance between the two. I don't know. Do we ever achieve wholeness? I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know.
So at this point, you would say that you are more whole and happier than you've ever been, with the acknowledgement that there is still more to come. What does that feel like for you now? And what do you experience in comparison to where you were when you were living in whereabouts did you grow up?
I grew up in Massachusetts, so Northeast US.
Right. So very different lives.
Yeah. So what I experience now is a trust in my soul guiding me. And I have specific techniques and practices that I do to connect with that every day, to calm my physical body, to open up my heart and my ears to really listen to that guidance. And so that I can take those action steps that need to be taken, because there's right action, and then there's action that might be I want to use the word wasteful, but it's not wasteful, but it's like action that might not be productive. There's things that we can do that are going to be that are going to move us forward and take care of ourselves in a positive way. And then there's things that aren't necessarily going to work or help or serve us. So I feel really, really blessed now that I've learned these things, that I've been through so many ups and downs, that I do feel I know, how to release, how to let go, how to connect with source, so that I can empower myself moving forward.
And a woman in her true power is one who is woken up to her womb and her sexuality in a healthy way. What is healthy sexuality?
I would say healthy sexuality is sexuality free from shame and guilt. Sexuality that leaves a woman feeling full and loved and seen and worshipped and adored and really honored. So for every woman, that might be different from woman to woman. What's going to feel good for her might depend on her age, might depend on her cultural background, might depend on just her astrology. Maybe some wild Aries might want something different than a Cancer. And so it's like, but does it leave you feeling whole? Does it leave you feeling full? Because for women, orgasm can be something where the energy just is very short and leaves the body quickly, or an orgasm can move up through the heart all the way up to the head and really fill. You can really connect astrally and connect to the solar system, and really your whole energy field can get a lot bigger and move outward. And can be a very celestial experience that happens with sexuality. For me, I need to feel incredibly safe with the person. And I need to, if I'm connecting with another person, I need to feel like there is a solid container that we're in, that he's not going to leave, that he's going to check in tomorrow, that he adores me, that I'm special particularly to him. I have and this is, my cultural background is, marriage and tradition and Catholic, which that sounds very Catholic, but it also has to do with my Cancer North Node, that family is very important to me. So it really depends on the person, because other women healthy sexuality might look like lots of lovers, or threesomes, or sex parties, how do we know that? We have to go on that journey with ourselves. And so healthy sexuality for every woman, I think, if she feels that she needs to improve her health in that area, would start with her getting to know herself sexually, which is why I love yoni eggs so much, because a yoni egg practice is a Taoist tantric practice. There's a system. First you do this, then you do that, then you do the next thing. And as you move through these steps, you're sort of slowly opening your body, opening your heart, opening to your emotions. You are opening your own new pleasure pathways and new types of orgasm and new types of sensation. And you're taking yourself on that journey of release, which then, once you know yourself, then you can empower yourself in whatever ways what type of sexual experience will be empowering or not.
So as we wrap up today, any women hearing this feeling inspired to reconnect with themselves, what would be the first step they could do?
Put a hand on your heart and a hand on your womb and take 3 deep breaths. And just be there with yourself, with whatever you're feeling, in full acceptance. Are you feeling good? Are you feeling shame? Are you feeling happy? Are you feeling sad? First step for any woman is just full acceptance, no resistance, nothing. Just allowing the moment to be exactly what it is and shining unconditional love and light onto that.
That's beautiful. I'm doing it right now.
Oh,
thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. That was such an enlightening talk.
I hope this episode has inspired you to keep going on what can sometimes be a tough road to inner peace and true happiness. If you want to dive deeper into what we talked about today, go to thehealingcocoon.co for show notes and all things personal growth. And don't forget, if you're loving The Healing Cocoon, then put that love into action and subscribe, rate and review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts. And until next time, my friends, let's rise and shine together.